Listen, can you hear it? That voice narrating your thoughts right now. The one that just became aware of itself as I mentioned it. That voice isn't you. What if I told you that the constant stream of thoughts you identify as yourself is merely an illusion, a storyteller fabricating a narrative that you've mistaken for your identity? Today, we're diving into one of consciousness's deepest mysteries. The voice in your head isn't you, and the implications are more profound than you might imagine. If you've ever caught yourself having an internal dialogue, questioning your decisions, rehearsing conversations, or criticizing your actions, then you've encountered this mysterious narrator. But have you ever stopped to wonder who exactly is speaking and who is listening? Stay with me on this journey, and I promise by the end of this video, you'll never experience your own thoughts in quite the same way again. Close your eyes for a moment. Listen to the voice that's reading these words in your mind. Now ask yourself, who is that? Most of us go through life completely identified with this internal monologue. When it speaks, we assume it's us speaking. When it judges, we believe we're judging. When it fears, we feel afraid. This seamless merging creates the illusion that we are our thoughts. But what if there's a distinction between the thinker and the awareness observing those thoughts? Ancient wisdom traditions have recognized this separation for millennia. Buddhist philosophy calls it the witnessing consciousness, the ability to observe your thoughts without being entangled in them. Meditation teachers instruct students to watch their thoughts like clouds passing through the sky, implying there must be something doing the watching that is separate from the thoughts themselves. Modern neuroscience offers compelling insights too. The brain's default mode network activates when we're lost in thought, creating what scientists call narrative self-reference. Essentially, the brain telling stories about who we are. But researchers have identified that this network can be temporarily quieted, allowing us to experience consciousness without the narrator's constant commentary. So if this voice isn't you, then what is it? And more importantly, who are you if not this voice? To understand this internal voice, we need to explore its origins. This narrator wasn't born with you. It developed gradually as you acquired language and absorbed cultural programming. Think about it. Before you learned language, you experienced reality directly. As infants, we don't filter the world through conceptual thought. We simply experience sensations, emotions, and perceptions without labeling them. There was no voice narrating experience, just pure, unfiltered awareness. Around age 2, most children begin developing internal speech. By age 7, this inner dialogue becomes fully established. What's fascinating is how this voice incorporates the language patterns, beliefs, and judgments of our parents, teachers, peers, and cultural environment. The philosopher Alan Watts described it as a social institution that we have internalized. Your inner voice speaks to you using the same words others have used when speaking to you. It judges you using criteria you've inherited. It fears what your culture has taught you to fear. This explains why the voice can be so critical. If you grew up with demanding parents, your inner narrator likely adopted their standards. If your culture values certain achievements, your inner voice probably pushes you toward them. The narrator isn't a neutral observer, it's a collection of internalized social programming. Neurologically, this makes perfect sense. The brain regions responsible for inner speech are the same ones we use for external communication. We've essentially turned our social communication tools inward, creating an internal dialogue that reflects our social conditioning. But here's the profound insight. If this voice was created through conditioning, it cannot be your essential self. It's a psychological function, a useful tool for navigating social reality, but not the core of who you are. Why do we have this incessant mental chatter at all? What evolutionary purpose does it serve? The internal narrator emerged as humans developed complex social structures. We needed to plan, remember, coordinate with others, and maintain a coherent social identity. The voice in your head serves these crucial functions. First, it's your brain's way of organizing experience into a coherent narrative. Without this continuous story, your life would feel like disconnected moments without meaning or purpose. The narrator weaves your experiences into an ongoing story where you're the protagonist. Second, it helps you navigate social reality by simulating interactions before they happen. When you rehearse a conversation or imagine how others might react to your behavior, you're using the narrator to predict social outcomes. Third, it maintains your identity over time by constantly reminding you who you are. I'm shy, I'm ambitious, I'm not good with numbers. The voice creates the illusion of a stable self, despite constant change. These functions were so advantageous for our ancestors that the narrator became our default mode of consciousness. It's always trying to solve problems, many of which don't actually exist outside its own creation. But there's a shadow side to this mental mechanism. The narrator often gets stuck in unproductive patterns, ruminating on past mistakes. I should have said, worrying about hypothetical futures, what if I fail? Making judgments based on internalized standards, creating problems to solve even when none exist, constantly comparing your story to others' stories. The irony is that while the narrator evolved to help us solve problems, it creates many of the problems it then attempts to solve. Much of our psychological suffering comes not from reality itself, but from the stories our narrator tells about reality. Have you ever experienced a moment of complete mental silence, perhaps during intense physical activity, creative flow, or deep meditation? These are glimpses of consciousness without narration. In these spaces between thoughts, something remarkable happens. Without the narrator labeling, judging, and conceptualizing experience, reality is encountered directly. Many describe this as a feeling of profound presence or aliveness. What's revealing is that happiness, peace, and fulfillment are often found in these gaps when the narrator temporarily falls silent. Think about your moments of deepest joy. Were you lost in thought, or were you fully immersed in direct experience? The mystical traditions of the world have pointed to this space between thoughts as our true nature. Zen Buddhism calls it no mind, Taoism refers to it as the uncarved block, and certain Hindu traditions name it pure awareness. Even the most mundane activities transform when experienced without narrative overlay. Washing dishes becomes a symphony of sensations rather than a chore to endure. A walk through familiar surroundings reveals details previously overlooked. Conversations deepen when we listen without mentally preparing our next response. This suggests something profound, that the voice in your head has been obscuring a more fundamental dimension of your being. The narrator isn't just not you, it's actually preventing you from experiencing who you truly are. If the voice in your head isn't you, then what is? What remains when the narrator falls silent? Here we encounter a fascinating paradox. The you beyond thought cannot be described by thought. The moment the narrator tries to conceptualize your true nature, it reduces it to another story, another concept. Yet throughout history, those who have glimpsed beyond the narrator have attempted to point toward this ineffable dimension. Consciousness without an object, Buddhist psychology. The witness, Advaita Vedanta. The ground of being, Christian mysticism. A presence, contemporary spiritual teachings. What these traditions suggest is that your essential nature is not a thing that can be named, but the aware space in which all things appear, including thoughts. Not the content of consciousness, but consciousness itself. Imagine the narrator as a character in a movie who has forgotten it's just playing a role. It believes it's the entire film. What we're suggesting is that you are not the character, you're the screen on which the entire movie plays. You're not just another object in awareness, you are awareness itself. This isn't merely philosophical speculation. Many who have systematically investigated their experience through meditation report the same discovery, that beneath the shifting thoughts, emotions, and sensations lies an unchanging awareness that cannot itself be observed as an object, because it is the ultimate subject. Modern cognitive science offers a complementary perspective. What we experience as ourself is not a unified entity, but a collection of processes without a central controller. The narrator creates the illusion of a unified self by telling stories that connect these processes. A research in consciousness study suggests that our fundamental nature may be closer to this boundless awareness than to any particular content of awareness. What would it mean to live from this understanding? How might your experience transform if you no longer completely identified with the voice in your head? First, suffering would lose much of its grip when you recognize that your thoughts about a situation are not the situation itself. Painful narratives lose their power. The difference between "this is awful" and "I'm having the thought that this is awful" is profound. Second, authentic connection would deepen when you're not continuously absorbed in your internal dialogue. You can truly listen to others. You can respond to what's actually happening, rather than to your thoughts about what's happening. Third, creative inspiration would flow more freely. The narrator operates from memory and known patterns. Beyond the narrator lies access to intuition and creative insights that transcend the known. Fourth, the present moment would come alive. Without being constantly pulled into thoughts about past and future, each moment reveals its inherent richness. I'm not suggesting we should or even could silence the narrator completely. It serves important functions in our daily lives. But we could develop a new relationship with it, recognizing it as a useful tool rather than mistaking it for our core identity. The shift in perspective isn't achieved through more thinking, but through direct recognition. It's not about adding new beliefs, but seeing through the mechanism of belief itself. It's an experiential recognition that can happen in an instant, though integrating it may take a lifetime. The voice in your head isn't you. It's a psychological function, a tool for navigating reality, but you are the awareness in which this voice appears. This recognition doesn't make the voice disappear, but it fundamentally changes your relationship with it. Like clouds passing through the sky, thoughts come and go, but you remain as the open awareness in which all experience unfolds. I invite you to notice, in the moments after this video ends, the quality of the silence before your narrator begins commenting on what you've heard. In that silence lies a pointer to your true nature, not as a voice narrating experience, but as the boundless awareness in which all voices, all experiences arise and dissolve. And perhaps in that recognition, you'll discover what spiritual teachers have pointed to for millennia, that what you've been seeking through endless thinking has been here all along, in the space between your thoughts. Listen, can you hear it? The silence beneath the voice. That's you. If you found this exploration valuable, please consider subscribing and sharing your thoughts in the comments below. What's your experience with the voice in your head? Have you ever noticed the awareness behind it? And remember, you are not your thoughts, but the awareness witnessing them.